For me, bass is the most important part of any audio system because it affects everything else that we hear so much. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, no, Terry, it's the vocals, it's the mid-range that is the most important. Well, we can do a simple test on this. Play a piece of music, get an amplifier with tone controls and turn the bass one up a little bit. And I bet, things sound better. I bet the music sounds more pleasing, it's a bit richer, a bit warmer, and that vocal probably sounds a little bit more solid in the center. And then take that bass control and turn it all the way off. And I bet things don't sound as good anymore, do they? I bet the music's rhythm and energy and life is gone. I bet that solid central vocal that you've just been enjoying now sounds empty and hollow. I genuinely think that bass from 500 Hertz and down is the most important part to try and get right as part of a hi-fi system setup, and yet it's really, really difficult because there's so many external factors influencing what we hear. But when we're talking about subwoofers or sub-bass frequencies, then really we're talking about probably 100 Hertz and down. So yeah, very deep, very low bass frequencies. And yet I've been to a number of REL subwoofer demos where they demonstrate that the RELs can improve the perception of a hi-fi system sound for vocals. They can improve the perception of a hi-fi system sound for soundstage width, and soundstage depth. That's a really interesting one to experience. And that a few times it's been shown to me that the REL subwoofers can improve the hi-fi systems or your perception of the hi-fi system's treble. And I think that is the tone controls demo that we kind of spoke about before, but maybe there's more to it than that. Either way, with all of these demos, all of the direct live calibrations I've done now for all of the different AV and hi-fi systems, I can confidently sit here and say that I believe 99% of audio systems will benefit from well set up subwoofers. But what if you are the 1%? Your system sounds great, you don't need subwoofers? Well, I've tried to test that as part of the reviews of a pair of Serie S 510 subwoofers.
You know that all I think about is you.
This is a review that has been split into two halves because I've had the REL Serie S 510 subwoofers here for a number of months, but I haven't always been able to use them because of what other products I've been reviewing. So hopefully regulars to the channel will remember back to earlier in the year when I reviewed the TAD Compact Evolution 1 speakers. And they were the first speakers that I reviewed and really listened to when I changed my room around. And at the time, I hadn't found the optimum position in the room for speakers for bass. Combined with, I think, just the character of the TAD CE1s and the HiFi system and how I had that set up, I just wasn't really getting the kind of bass that I was looking for from the system at that time. So in that instance, adding the REL subwoofers was like a night and day improvement to the sound of the system. And I was impressed by how fast and detailed and lively and punchy and do it all pretty much bob on perfect the bass was from the RELs. And I was able to integrate them to be seamless with the TAD speakers, so you couldn't hear where the subwoofers started and the speakers finished. And the TAD CE1 are £20,000 speakers, and the baby S-series subs from REL were more than able to keep up with them and massively improve actually the sound of that system. But roll on a few months, I am now much more used to listening to hi-fi systems and setting them up in the new listening room with the new acoustics. I've found now a much better spot in the room for speakers, which is more balanced between the bass delivery and the three-dimensional soundstage. It's still a compromise, but a much better compromise. And on top of that, I have been using a great amplifier and I've made some other improvements to my system, and I have been enjoying my best ever hi-fi sound in this listening room. And the Mission 770s are stunningly good speakers that on paper only deliver bass down to about 40 Hertz, but in practice they are delivering a measured bass performance in this listening room down to around 20 Hertz because of room boundary gain. And I have dialed in the Missions in this listening room we're using Dirac to be within about an inch of perfection, or at least I thought I had. And like I mentioned, I've been enjoying my best ever hi-fi sound in this listening room, which is something I've had some amazing hi-fi systems in here before. And I have been totally satisfied with the sound sound of the system totally satisfied with the bass from the Mission 770 speakers. Yes, I know it's not perfect, but it's been totally satisfying. So I feel like that's put me in that 1% of situation where I feel totally satisfied with the system. And I'm mindful of the fact that a pair of S510 subwoofers are now more expensive, significantly actually, than the speakers, which I am fine with because we can't have perfect hi-fi sound without perfect bass. And for £2,299, we do get very lovely looking subwoofers with a very high quality gloss paint finish. And I've been more than happy to have them here in my listening room because I think they look really cool. And I am a Go Commando audiophile. But the grills, yeah, they're big, they're chunky and they're heavy, and again, very nice. But a big part of me just enjoys seeing the silver drivers and enjoys seeing the drivers moving. And the side panel designs with those handles, yes, it's a little indulgent maybe, but in the flesh it's very nice and does break up the atypical black box look. The S510 feature a 10-inch continuous cast aluminium alloy main driver that is actively driven, and underneath is a 12-inch passive radiator that has a large amount of linear travel for better performance. And the system is driven by a 500 watt Class D amplifier. But let's be real here for a minute. You can buy subwoofers that are much larger and much more powerful for the same price as the REL S510s, and they will probably deliver more bass output at deeper frequencies and maybe higher SPL levels overall, if that is what you're looking for. And REL sells subwoofers that are larger and more powerful for quite a bit less money. I used to have 4 of them in here, but they are missing REL's main USP, their unique selling point, which is the high-level connection. And the high-level connection is the subwoofer taking its analog input signal from your HiFi System's amplifier output, and that will feed into what REL call their perfect filters, with REL's main goal being the subwoofer being able to deliver sub-bass frequencies with the same speed or faster than your main speakers. And for this review I have used the RELs exclusively for 2-channel hi-fi use, no home cinema use, and I have used them exclusively with REL's Bassline Blue high-level subwoofer cables. And REL say they are the best high-level subwoofer cables for the job, and I'm fine with that, but the reason I asked for them is because they come with a nice quality spade connection at the amplifier end, which just makes wiring them up much easier, and I prefer the really tight secure connection that you can get with a spade. And when you're changing gear as much as I am, the speed of that connection and the quality of that connection, just makes you feel more secure about what you're doing. And that's the one thing that I don't really love about the normal REL high-level subwoofer cables is that bare wire end. I always felt like they would be better if they come with a spade connection as well. So coming back to my 1% situation, just to recap. So I've got the HiFi System set up, the best I possibly can, delivering me the best hi-fi sound I've ever had in my listening room before. I was happy, really, really happy with the sound of the HiFi System. Totally satisfied with the bass that I was getting from the Mission 770s. I knew it wasn't perfect because perfect bass is one of those kind of dreams that audiophiles have that's very rarely ever able to be a reality, but it was totally satisfying bass. So what happened when I added the RELs to the system? Well, interestingly, pretty much the same thing as when I added them to the TAD CE1. I want to first talk about the benefit of the RELs for vinyl playback, because I was really quite surprised and impressed by that. If I pull this up here, this is a record. Hopefully you can see that, it's not too bright. This is a record that was gifted to me by Dali at the recent Munich high-end hi-fi show, and Dali is in the speaker manufacturer Dali, and this is a record that I can strongly recommend that you buy because it's an audiophile grade recording, but it's actually music that you can enjoy listening to. We don't always get that, and I would say it's a a mixture of maybe a bit of blues and a bit of folk type music, but with a modern sort of sound and a modern style. And there's some guitar in there, and there's some other bits, some enjoyable bits, and big male vocal, really nicely recorded actually, male vocal. And obviously the album's got some bass, but it isn't necessarily an album that screams subwoofer bass to you. But listening to this album, between having the RELs on and off, the difference was huge. There was much more body and soul to the singer's voice with the RELs, much more overall presence to the music, more grandiose in scale, and overall more fullness and warmth and richness to everything. This album, with this system set up like this in my room, made the entry-ish level Avid Ingenium turntable sound not entry level at all. And it was not perfect, of course, but what the RELs were adding was really making the difference by filling in a lot of what was obviously missing when they were turned off. And subjectively, I much preferred listening to this album with the subwoofers on than off. And obviously I listened to other records as well, but I don't have a huge record collection, so that part of the review was quite limited. But it didn't matter what the music I was listening to, I subjectively preferred the sound with the RELs on. So what happened when I added the RELs to the system for digital playback? Well, pretty much the same thing again. Straight away vocals sounded better, more full and more solid, and that's male and female vocals. And overall the system sounded more complete, more full from top to bottom as you look onto the musical picture happening in front of you. And there was more information there than before, which is an interesting one because it's more bass information that's helping to complete the picture. And it was mostly there from the missions on their own, but just more there with the RELs being added. And once you've heard it being more there, more complete, it's balanced nicer. That information is definitely correct. It's not, a bloom or anything like that that's being added. Once you've heard that be added to the music, you do definitely miss it when it's taken away. And then there were the obvious benefits to certain styles or types of music. And I've been listening to some rap music lately that has, a big punchy bass, and the REL subs will give me more of that big punchy and full bass, more impactful, more pleasing, type of bass for that style of music. And then you can go audiophile classic and go, church organ, pipe organ. And definitely there was more bass in the room, definitely more bass in the room with the RELs, which you would expect. And that makes that style of music much more pleasing, much more grandiose, especially a pipe organ, a church organ, because you are supposed to feel that instrument as much as you hear it. And I suppose you could say the same thing for dance music. But I can't say that I was getting, improved soundstage by adding the RELs. I think the missions were already giving me an outstandingly good soundstage for width and depth, about as good as I can get in this listening room. But adding the RELs to that definitely made the sound more complete, because each individual element that was kind of organised across a soundstage sounded more complete. There was more bass information to each individual part of it. So the overall presentation was not more three-dimensional. Soundstage wasn't improved, but the sound of that soundstage was improved. I hope I've explained that correctly. And I can't say that the treble was noticeably improved or changed or really any different by adding the RELs, but again, the treble was already very satisfying from the missions. So let's close out this review with the answer to a question that I asked REL. I reviewed REL's T9X subwoofer late last year, and I thought it was a great subwoofer, especially for the money. So I asked REL, why would someone buy two S510s over two T9X for twice the money? And the answer was simply more power. That means more control, more speed, and the customer will be able to experience more of what REL subwoofers offer, such as all the benefits that they talk about a lot, soundstage, benefits to vocals, etc. From my experience comparing, the REL S subwoofers to maybe the T subwoofers, I think the S's sound a bit more bold, they sound a bit bigger and a bit more grander in the bass that they deliver. I would call it a more voluptuous bass, which is a very non-technical term, but I think there is a very noticeable difference there in terms of kind of the fullness of the bass that they deliver, and that's probably because they have more power and are able to deliver more bass at deeper frequencies. And that's just based off lots of different experiences that I've had with these subwoofers, but they're not here together, so please do take that comment with a reviewer pinch of salt. And if you're unsure, REL do have a speaker pairings tool on their website to try and give customers some free advice, so it's always worth checking on there to get an idea of what might be the right subwoofers for your system. And I think the S510 are likely designed for rooms like mine, smaller to medium-sized rooms, but with the speed to match very good quality speakers, and I don't feel dissatisfied with them in any way for hi-fi or 2-channel use. And I have had the luxury of using them or listening to them as part of other people's home cinema systems, and they've done a very good job in that regard. But I do think there will be other subwoofers that would deliver a bigger, more impactful, and maybe deeper bass, arse-kicking type of experience for the money than these RELs will. And other subwoofers can offer, other nice features such as maybe Bluetooth app control and stuff like that. But you know what? I don't really miss that personally. I was okay and fine, getting up and making manual controls. One thing I do really like is when a subwoofer has a digital display, because then I can know exactly where I am and remember, right, if I make an adjustment, it goes up in digital, and it's easier to remember, when you're looking at numbers personally. But I do think that REL's kind of click system for their controls is probably the next best thing. And that's important because a pair of S510 subwoofers are going to cost you a fair chunk of money. And obviously in this system, they cost more money than the speakers. Like I said, I'm perfectly fine with that because I know how important bass is and what a difference that can make. And that is really the crux of the situation here, I think, because a pair of REL S510 subwoofers, I think, will likely add something to the system that maybe you've not got if you don't have the subwoofers, that I haven't been able to get without the subwoofers. And once you've had that in the system, you will you will appreciate it. It is very enjoyable, subjectively enjoyable. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you enjoyed it, smash that thumbs up button, and obviously subscribe to the Pursuit of Perfect System YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.